Let's do some introductions. So I'm Ricardo Romanillos. I am the Senior Director of Programs for the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. Uh, I am pleased to have you here today, and we're really excited to be launching this program with you. And Ashley, I'll turn it over to you, do some introductions, and I'll let you get started.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Conrad, and I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So it's lovely to be here and share space with you all today, albeit virtually. I'm hoping everyone's having a good week. I've actually just come on board on Nate's team about 2 months ago, and so I'm still learning as I go. So I'm really excited to share this opportunity with you all this afternoon. I am the Associate Director of Programs, and Ricardo and I will be working together on this project as we move forward. And so with that, I'll go ahead and move into the goals for today's webinar. So the overall themes that we're going to be hitting on is: what is the Equity Leadership Academy for States? Why should you participate? What are you going to learn throughout this experience? It is a longer term experience, and so we'll go into what that's going to mean in terms of time commitment and what your state will get out of engaging with us in this way. We'll move into what are the requirements for the academy. So what do your teams need to look like? How do you apply? And then we want to leave room at the end for, as Ricardo mentioned earlier, questions and answers. So what questions do you have for us? How can we help you specifically in this application process? Answer any questions that might be top of mind for you all currently. So that's what we're going to cover today. And with that, we'll move into overall, what is the Equity Leadership Academy for States? And so we're here to equip you all state members with the tools and resources you need as post-secondary systems through an equity lens as you're supporting those who are implementing the CLNA on the ground. It's important to note that this is a no-cost benefit for post-secondary state members, so there's no cost associated with this. We're going to be covering travel, we're going to be covering accommodations, and we'll go into the benefits of what this engagement will look like, but it's really to prepare you to help others. So similar to a train the trainer model, and we're really excited to move forward with this work. So we've laid out 4 overall things that you all will be learning from this experience. The overall themes are going to be adopting an equity lens, which is pretty broad. I know a lot of us already have that lens for our work. And so for some of us, it's going to be honing some of those skills. For some of us, we're newer on this journey. And so that's really going to be more of an intro. What is equity? How do I apply that to my professional lens and with those that I'm working with? How do I build on some of the skills that I already have? What are some new skills that will equip me for these really tough conversations? It isn't easy work. It's tough work. It's multi-layered, and so we're here to help you strengthen that lens and in community while we're doing it. We don't have all of the answers, so a big component of this program is also building on the strengths that exist currently within your teams and across our nation. The next point is going to be around building institutional capacity, so you're able to more fully support those that you're working with and the education agencies that you're working with. So how do we take what we learned through this project and bring it internal into our institution and spread that knowledge and information with others so that we're able to better support those that we're working with and those who are working on the ground. The third component is around creating community. So we know this work cannot be done in a silo. It has to be done in community. We need support. All of us need support in this work. We must build on the relationships that we have and strengthen those, as well as create new relationships. This work cannot be done in a vacuum. And so we're really excited for this to also provide opportunity for us and for you all to build community locally, but also nationally, so that when you have those tough questions that arise, you'll have a deeper relationship with us, but also deeper relationship with others in the cohort who are going to be moving through this journey with us. So I'm really excited for what that can look like for this group of people for this pilot proposal. And then finally, we're going to be building off of after we're creating this community, how do we share what we've learned with others, right? It's not something we want to keep just for ourselves, or transactional, okay, I have this new toolkit, now I'm going to just go and implement it. But how do we really share what we've learned as a group and as a cohort with others in the field? How do we make sure we're creating sustained paths to implementing the CLNA with an equity lens? And so those are the four components there. Um, this this next piece is around, what does the project look like? What are the expectations in terms of what you're going to be getting out of this work starting this summer and moving into early next year? So we've created this timeline. This is all also spelled out a little more in detail in the FAQ sheet that Ricardo was referencing earlier. So in the beginning, we're going to be working hand in hand with you through a design thinking phase to co-create the curriculum and the facilitation modules. So we are going to be building off of our current pipe curriculum that we have been implementing for some time, but we really want to make sure that what we're presenting you all is something that you need, and ways that we can tweak our curriculum to adjust to your specific needs. And so we're going to start out with a design thinking stage where we're meeting with each state member in your teams and hearing what you want to learn, what do you want to get out of this process, and then we're going to integrate that into what your experience looks like. The other components that will follow that late summer, early fall, is we will be doing a 2-day training session based off of our pipe curriculum, in accordance with the feedback that you will have given us through our design thinking phase. This will be specifically tailored to post-secondary, state level, how we help you support others in the CLNA process. And in conjunction with that, we're going to be having 4 monthly virtual technical assistance calls or meetings. And so after that training, we're going to have monthly touch points with your teams around what are your needs, what are coming up, in what ways can we support you, more real time on the ground, what issues are coming up for you, how do we help you move through those processes. And then finally, we're going to have a full day, 1-day engagement that's going to help and be centered around capacity building, and also just kind of a wrap up. What have we learned? How do we apply? What action steps can we take? How do we share this internally with our teams and making sure that we're building capacity there? And then finally, upon request, we will be providing one-on-one technical assistance to address any local needs that you may have. So a lot of these conversations are going to happen in a group setting where you're able to share needs, concerns, things that you're learning. And then we also recognize locally you might have specific needs that come up that are more specific to your local context. And so we also want to make space for that. And so upon request, we will have that those opportunities.
Yeah. And I think Ashley is really called forward. What you're seeing through this project, and really what was front and center for us, all of you have a longstanding relationship with NAEP, and so clearly you have an understanding already of what pipe is about. And for a lot of us, when we look at the CLNA process, we see a lot of the pipe process, right? Because of NAEP's advocacy, because of your membership that was able to get in there. But how do we have these conversations in a way that we can sustain what our local education agencies are doing, what our community colleges are doing? How can we support them best? And that's what we want to do. And that's why, while at the heart of this is pipe, frankly, those conversations that we're going to be having in person, those conversations that we'll have in front and at the back of this, are really going to inform what happens. It's going to inform both the construction of these 3 days that we spend together. It's going to inform how we spend our virtual technical assistance time together. It is really about making sure that we bring to you something that enables you to apply that equity lens, because we're all at different places. Frankly, I mean, Ashley and I are at different places, and so making space for those conversations is what NAEP really does the most. That's what we're here to do, and by building partnerships between and among all of us, that's what we hope to do. Is to kind of create that new group that can come to each other and start sharing best practices. And so you'll see again the pipe at the heart of this, but really what I think Ashley did a great job of calling forward is how the iteration is going to take place as a result of the information that you provide with us. The goal then obviously will be to then boom scale this up, right? And that's how this has a bigger impact. So Lauren asked us a question, can I participate in this project if I'm an individual member and not a state member? And that's something that Lauren, we can talk about specifically after the webinar. But this is for post-secondary state members. We're talking about the higher education coordinating boards, the higher education commissions, wherever those reside, whether that's in a DOE or not. We're specifically focusing in on state level memberships. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for those additions. Absolutely agree. We do have a timeline and an approach that we're going to take with this, but we're really on this journey together, and we really want to create space for those hard, vulnerable conversations around the work. And so, yeah, with that, I think we will move on to academy requirements, which you hit on briefly. Ricardo, thank you for moving us into that section. So this is specifically for post-secondary state members. Again, we can have conversation with those who might be an individual member, but this is specifically focused on post-secondary. We are asking folks to create teams, states to create teams of 3 to 5 people. So this, it's up to you on who you include in your team. We have, a list of people that could be included around post-secondary agency personnel, specialists, consultants, leaders, and students. And so one lens to this work that's really important is around appropriate representation. So who are we bringing to the space? How do we ensure when we're having conversations around equity that we have those from historically oppressed groups present from the get-go, right? So they're on our leadership teams. We're making space for those who experience the most disparate outcomes around historical context from the beginning and on our teams. And so the priority, so in the application, you'll see that we're giving priority to states who both include a student on their team. And so this young person should ideally be from a special population that's outlined in the Perkins 5 legislation, and including students of color. So we're asking that we bring young people from the get-go into this process. And then we're also asking that one or more members on your leadership team, adult members, are from a special population, including people of color. And so we really want to make sure that these groups are representing the young people that we serve every day on the ground, to make sure that those voices are elevated from the get-go, and that there's an inclusive environment created. I know that in the past, it's not as common to include young people or an intergenerational approach, perhaps. For some of us, that might be really comfortable. For others of us, it might be new. And so we're happy if you have any questions around what that could look like, how to recruit this young person. Maybe you have someone already in mind, oh, this individual could bring so much to our team, or, oh, I don't know if I have those relationships. Who does have those relationships with the young people that we serve? How do we pull them into this conversation and make sure that they are included in the leadership team? I think I'm personally really excited about this. I love creating spaces where we're all coming from different perspectives. I think that's where we can have a lot of beautiful conversation, but then a lot of improved solution building and outcomes for the work that we're leading on the ground. And so if you guys have any questions about what
Yeah,
that could
we
look
do.
like,
We
okay,
do actually.
I would love to
So
hear them. Thank you.
Casey's asking us, and I think we're using young people kind of as an umbrella term at this point. So Casey asked, does the student representation have to be young, or can it be a higher ed student of any age?
Great question. So I think for us, I wouldn't want to include any age group in terms of student, but when we're talking about students, generally we're thinking of like the young adult age between 18 to 25. I think in general, those are usually the age ranges in which we're working with. We are trying to focus on uplifting younger people's voices. Oftentimes on leadership teams, it tends to be mid to upper age range, and so we really want to make sure that there's cohesiveness there and representation there. And Ricardo, if you'd like to jump in,
Yeah.
please do.
Yeah, and I want to echo and reiterate what Ashley brought forward there. And then we are also cognizant that depending on the state, your breakdown of students that you're serving, we know obviously we've worked with a lot of colleges where adults coming back to the institution may be actually the primary audience that that community college is serving. So while we're somewhat steering who we think would be best to represent that, you know, if it's an adult that represents one of the special population groups, especially individuals of color, then by all means, we're not going to say no to that at all. So I appreciate that question, Casey. So I think I gave you a very squishy, we both gave you a very squishy answer, yet somewhat formed. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is whoever you serve, we want them represented. So if you're
Right.
primarily working with adult students and this is state level, on the state level, then of course that's who we would want at the table. If it isn't, and we need to be honest about, who is generally are we serving, we're asking that there just be clear representation there.
Yeah, and I think obviously what this was a fantastic addition to the project, and what makes this much easier than dealing with obviously secondary students is the fact that we're still dealing with adults, whether they're young adults or middle-aged adults. So that should be helpful in that. But we're as you go forward in producing your application and you're thinking through, as Ashley already offered up, we're more than happy to think through this with you, who might be a great representative. We're here as a sounding board, right? While this is an application, I want to make sure that we all understand we're not sitting for the SATs or anything like that, right? We're working together on this.
Yes. Are there any other questions around
I
that?
don't know. Let's see. I don't see any other questions at the moment. Casey said thanks. You're very, very welcome.
Yes.
And perfect question.
Yes, absolutely. Um,
Um, Mindy's asking, is the 5-member team size limit flexible? Texas is a big, Texas is a big state, my home state. Um, could we have, it's such a Texas question. I love it. Could we have more? I often say in Texas, and actually I say it in Dallas, more is more, frankly. The more we have, the better. So could we have 6 or 7? That's honestly going to depend on the cohort as we start seeing applications. So we'll allow you to be flexible at this point, and if you want to include 6, then include 6. We might come back to you. Just know we might come back to you and tell you that we're going to have to reduce the size of the group. Okay. Plus, frankly, if we get too large, then we might get squirrely in some of the conversations. But let's see, Emily is asking, just to clarify, members of the team do not have to be limited to just the post-secondary state agency. And while we were thinking that this was post-secondary state agency individuals along with a student representative, we have included there that you might include community individuals, consultants. I mean, the team is going to be your makeup. And I think actually you join me in saying this. We want a team that is representative first and foremost of the demographics that you're serving. I think that will best create the space for us to do the work that we want to do. And we're happy to work through with you who might be great people to include on that team. So yes, it can include more than just the state agency, as a
and
simple answer.
and to add to that, I think pushing us a little bit. So I know part of when we're talking about equity, we might not be currently serving um, a representative student base. And so if we're currently not serving demographics that we want to be included, that means we need to include those missing demographics on our leadership team, right? And so I think it's one thing to kind of shoot for, okay, maybe we have a student population of that's 80% white, just to use like a person of color as the metric here. We might push our boundaries in terms of representation on our leadership team where we might not want 80% white, right? Because we're missing people of color and students of color in those demographic goals. And so what would it look like to include more people of color, or perhaps an overrepresentation on our leadership team if we have relationship with those folks? What would it look like for that? And so I think representation is essential, but also how do we kind of push our boundaries a little bit there to make sure we perhaps have over representation of the folks that we intend to serve, even if we're not currently serving them yet, right?
Yeah. Ashley, Stephanie Perkins is asking, can the members from the community be personnel from community colleges?
Hmm.
And, you know, I don't know that I have an answer, yay or nay, to that. I think what we want to center is ultimately this project is about creating a space where we as state agencies can come together and think through and increase our capacity to be able to deliver this work to those community colleges, to our community members, to our students. And so uh, you are ultimately the focus of this. Um, but, and we know that including a diverse group in the team is going to help lift us all up. And that's why we wanted to bring this forward. So my answer is to say, I think the best representatives on the team are those that are going to help lift up the team, frankly, right? So that's why Ashley is bringing forward, if we don't have a lot of demographic diversity in terms of students of color, individuals of color, then let's make that a priority, because we know that that's going to help create that space, that environment where we're all going to be able to grow. And so, Stephanie, I see that you said thank you, so I'm glad we answered that for you.
Great.
And we'll have more room for questions here in a few minutes, but I'll turn it back over to you, Ashley.
Great, thank you. And thank you. I'm glad we were able to ask questions as we go. That's helpful, I think, for everyone. So thank you for you all for putting those in the chat box and for creating space for us to have that dialogue. I really appreciate it. And great questions. And so the other piece of this, outside of representation, and that being one of our goals for the teams, is this is a commitment, right? So not only is it an energetic commitment around the work, and the work it can be difficult and fun and exciting, but it's also a time commitment. And so we're asking folks to come forward who do have a commitment to either building on their existing equity lens or building out what an equity lens could look like for them, and an openness to that, specifically as it pertains to the CLNA process, and how do we meld those two things together. And then we also want to be working with states and folks who really are eager to share and apply what they learn. And I'm sure that pertains to everyone who is on this webinar. You're obviously taking the time out of your day, but we do want to uplift that from the beginning. We need folks who are committed to this work, committed to an equity lens, and committed to building that capacity internally within your institution and within your state, and building community around this and sharing what we learn with others, especially those who are going to be implementing this on the ground. So with that, if there aren't any current questions that are popping up, we'll move straight into the application process. And so Ricardo, I know, has put in some resources in the channel there where you can look at our website, look at our FAQ sheet, have access to the application. One thing that we did put on our website, if you're there, or if you move into that space later, is we do have a sample application. So oftentimes you get on an online platform and you start going, you can't save your application, you have the questions, but you're not ready to formalize your answers yet. So we've put a sample form on our website for you all to where you'll see what questions you're going to be asked on the online portal. You can prepare those ahead of time if you wish. If not, totally fine, but that is there for folks who really like to pre-plan or maybe share with those who you might be interested in including on your team. And so you can access that on our website. We are asking that folks have their online application submitted to us by May 8th. And so our cutoff time for that is, the 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. But we are asking that folks, if you're able to, by May 8th, that's our cutoff, please have your applications into us. Any questions that arise between now and then, we are absolutely open to any conversation or questions that you all might have, especially after reviewing the application. Please let us know. And then our goal is to have everyone notified by May 25th around their application status. Because this is a pilot project, we're only going to be pulling in 5 to 8 states, 6 to 8 states. So we might have more folks interested than we can for this specific cohort bring on. Again, with in mind that we're hoping to scale this up in the future, especially after we gather all the lessons learned from this cohort and from this process. And so May 25th, we'll let everyone know where you stand. And we're really excited to work with you all. And let us know if you have any questions around what this process looks like. And with that, I think we can open it up to any other inquiries or question marks that came up for you all.
So Ashley, we do have a question, and it's a rather important question. So Kimberly is asking in the chat box, Wyoming did the pipe process 2 years ago. What would the benefit be for Wyoming to do the academy? And I think that's a really good question, and it helps bring up what a distinction for this, right? Some of us, in fact, are presently working with NAEP on pipe implementations, and including at the community college level. So this project isn't about taking you through pipe. We are using that as the process as a foundation for the learning. But ultimately, the goal of this project is how can we center equity within our work, providing technical assistance to community colleges? How can we personally do our own work so that we can center equity in everything that we do through the CLNA? You know, we've just seen how, very understandably, we've been given a lot of room through because of our current state. You know, we have extended deadlines, we have diminished requirements, which provides a lot of room to implement the CLNA in different ways. And so what we want to do is provide you with the space that uses pipe as a knowledge part, but we want to provide you the space to grow individually, grow as a team, grow as a state, to center equity in the process. And what would that look like? What would the conversations be? What barriers or hiccups might I face in trying to lead this with an academic dean or a CTE coordinator when I go one-on-one with them? What does that look like? And so that's really what the conversations are going to be about. So what would be the benefit for Wyoming? It increases Wyoming's capacity through you to be able to center equity in this work. And so then I think that is really where this changes, right? And what differentiates NAEP's work in this field. It isn't about the program improvement process for equity per se. It is really about the conversations that are happening. And we know that, and I've experienced so many times that through this process, by raising our consciousness, by raising our awareness level, it changes the way, the questions that we ask. It also changes the way that we come to this work and how we show up to this work. And that's ultimately what this is about. How can I show up differently and in a new way, provide technical assistance to the LEAs? We have some other questions that are popping up, but I want to make sure and give this fair treatment. Ashley, is there anything that you want to add on to that?
No, I think that's a perfect response. The only thing I would add is that what's so unique about this process is that we're going to be asking you from the get-go, what do you need? What are the gaps that you're experiencing, or what is it that you want to get out of this process? We don't have a prescriptive, okay, X, Y, and Z, these are the steps we're going to take, these are the processes we're going to take you through. We have a blueprint of what that could look like, but this is really also going to be informed by you and what your current needs are and what do you want to get out of this. Of course, we have a lot of what we can offer, and it sounds like you have gone through the PIPE process, so you know broadly what we could be bringing to the table. But we do want to also leave ample space for what are your needs, what are your concerns, what are your experiences, and how do we provide a training that's really catered to that specifically.
Thanks, thanks for adding that. Thanks for adding that.
Absolutely.
Kimberly, I hope that helps, and by all means, add on in the chat box. I'm going to move on. Casey has a question, Ashley, about how will the project, yes, it did. Okay, good. How will the project adjust if COVID-19 prevents travel in the fall and winter? And I will say we already, ECMC Foundation, who is the funder of this project, is very well aware, and we're very well aware that that might be the case. While we haven't created a superstructured plan B, what we are first going to do is flex our time. We have an idea as to our time frame right now, that we're going to push forward with, because hopefully by then things will have been resolved. So that's why we're looking at late summer, um, late August, early September, possibly even further out into the fall. And if COVID-19 still remains an issue at that point, then we can look to virtual engagements if necessary. But it's our hope that we don't have to go to that, and we can continue to have an in-person, because again, an in-person event is, where a lot of these the stories happen, the conversations happen that really help us move along. So nothing formalized just yet, other than to flex out if necessary. And we wanted to get teams in on the front end now while we had the time. While we know that you're balancing a lot at the present moment, we're hoping that we can get our team selected, and then as we move forward through this year, if we need to flex, we will absolutely be gracious in that, and we will flex to make sure that this is not an encumbrance on you and makes your life harder. So that would be my answer to that. Ashley, any additions?
Nope, that sounds good.
Nope. All right, very good. Gabriel asks, curious about applying. Oh, yes. That is a great question, Gabriel, in terms of how that works specifically for Nevada, and we're happy to speak to that specifically later on. And but the way that you're describing it, I don't see that as an issue, but perhaps we can work through that together so that I can understand the dynamics of your state more directly. So at this point, we don't have any other questions. We can come back, keep on if things are percolating. We know things kind of will sit. I want to point you to some important bits of information. First, I want to point you to our website, right? And these are located in the materials within the webinar. You can access these materials directly. Both the links to the web page, the links to the application are available within this webinar. If you're watching this webinar in the recording, you're in the right place already. And then also the frequently asked questions flyer. There's a lot of great information in there. We talk about the program, we talk about the aspects of the program, how this is going to play out, what our hopes are, our dreams, our desires, and you'll find that in the frequently asked questions. Then also you'll have a sample application. Ashley and I were both share that we hate to jump into an application without knowing what it is that it's going to ask you before you get there. So you'll find a sample there. You can see that it's a short questionnaire. It gets to some important questions, but it's not overly cumbersome, I don't think. And then finally, you'll find a link within the materials, a link to the actual application. Ashley gave you the timeline. It's also there in the frequently asked questions. So let's get our applications in. And we're here. Ashley's provided her email address to you. By all means, as you're going through this and you hit a question or you hit a road bump, don't hesitate to call us. Don't hesitate to email us and let us know what those questions are. Your program managers, a lot of us have existing relationships with Kathleen, Janae, and Greg. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to them. They'll steer you effectively. Okay. Lauren is asking, is travel to the 2-day training on state's costs or taken care of by you? Ashley?
So we're covering all costs. So all travel costs, everything is on us. This is absolutely a no cost benefit to state members.
I'm doing like raise the roof
Yeah.
gesture. I know you
Oh,
can't see it.
I appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yes. All right. So we are paying for this all. This is entirely on NAEP's time. We wanted to make this entirely easy for you. So the the only requirement is that a passionate plea for a dedicated, diverse group of individuals that want to come work on this. So to that point, then Ashley, let's come back to the team membership. The question from Sherry is, what would the ideal team membership look like from your perspective, taking into account a student, of course? Do you want to riff on that and I can jump on?
Sure. Yeah. I think ideally, it would be your team would represent the students that you serve with a possible overrepresentation of the students you wished you served or the students in most need. Is often an equity lens that I try to adopt in my work. So who are we serving? Who do we wish we served? Who is in most need? And try to create a team that reflects that and being really intentional around what your demographic goals are for your team. Another piece and component to that is we're not asking that you tokenize, the people of color in your workspace or those with the most needs. We're just simply asking that we make sure that there is clear representation and overrepresentation on your teams.
Great. Thank you. Um, and I was answering a question in the chat box, and so I apologize if you already said this. I would also think about um, diversity in terms of uh, positionality, in terms of rank within our organization. We want to make sure that this is something that can lead to some changes ultimately, right? We want to see changes within the culture of the organization, changes within the way it does its work, changes possibly even within policy, right? That would be the ultimate representation of this. Would it be codified into actual policy? So we always find that if we have a diversity of authority within teams, we find that teams feel emboldened, feel empowered to do more concrete work. So I would be thinking about also how can we get some uh, a diversity in terms of that. I would include, just putting on my lens. Now, this is a secondary lens, right? And thinking about my team when I was in the school district. I would include, an executive. I would include somebody that's over the program, perhaps over CT itself, the director. I would include a program officer, a specialist, somebody that's doing that work every day. Possibly, I was stuck working with policy and language in my office while my team was out doing the work with teachers. Frankly, they were the most important person to be on this team. Me, I only do so much, right? So that's how I would answer that, is we're thinking about how we can include a vast variety of perspective. Okay.
Great.
And then Casey asks, and this is a good question, and we can think through this as a specific state, and you're very welcome, Sherry. Oregon is a small team, and so if we want to think about partnering up with another state, that might be something that we can look to. We don't want size of the team to be a hindrance, and so we might be able to come up with some ideas on how we can get a replete team that would be nice and representative for Oregon. Okay. So I think I'm going to put a pin in it. Casey, let's talk about it offline, and we can come up with an elegant solution, I think. And to the latter part of your question, again, we're going to be developing this with you. This isn't going to be where you've seen your community colleges go through. We're going to do a project. We're going to go do action research and do a project. This isn't that level of pipe. What we're doing is doing the internal work so that we can support that pipe work within the field. So it's a little bit different perspective. This is a different perspective than NAEP has done in the past, right? We typically come in and we do that one-on-one work with the community college. Now we're doing that with you so that you can support that work internally. And so it's a different way of doing this work, but equally effective. And in fact, you have such a huge reach and such a huge impact with the colleges in your state that by doing this, we're magnifying the reach of this work. So I hope that helps as well. So I think with that, if we don't have any other questions, I want to make sure take time to download those information pieces. You'll find Ashley's email address. You all can reach us by phone, by email. We're already a virtual organization, so we're ready and willing and happy to hop on the phone with you whenever you need. As you go through this, we welcome any questions. We welcome thinking through how to create an elegant solution for your state, because we want this to be a huge success, because this ultimately will have a huge impact on the students that you're serving, which is ultimately what this is about. So with that, I really want to thank you for taking up your lunch time for a lot of us. For some of us, our second breakfast time, maybe our coffee time, I don't know, to sit through this and listen to us. And I want to say a huge special thanks to the ECMC Foundation for their generous funding of this project. Without it, we wouldn't be able to be doing this work. Ashley, any parting thanks?
No, I'm really excited. Thank you all for sharing time with us today. I know things are a little crazy right now, a little crazier than normal for some of us. And so thank you for being here. I'm personally very excited about this project. It's an honor to be here with you all today, and I'm really looking forward to what we can accomplish together, and what it looks like for us to build a relationship with each other and really move our own personal equity lenses into a different space as a community.